Hey, this is Jason Reitman. I'm the co-writer and director of Saturday Night, the movie that you're about to watch. If this is not the movie you were intending to watch, you probably should stop now. It's October 1st, 2024, and I'm here on the Sony lot, former MGM lot, where they actually once shot Wizard of Oz. And I'm here joined by some of my collaborators today to give you a little behind look at how we made this movie. I should say that, the idea originally came from a couple places. But it came down to this. We wanted to do a 90-minute movie, the 90 minutes leading up to the first episode of Saturday Night Live. And we always knew right from the beginning that the last line of the movie would be live from New York. It's Saturday night. And my co-writing partner, Gil Ken, and I achieved this by interviewing everyone we could find that was around on October 11th, 1975. We interviewed Lorne Michaels. We interviewed Dick Ebersol. We interviewed every living writer, actor, the production designer, the costume designer, members of Billy Preston's band. We actually found an NBC page. And of course, having interviewed everyone, we realized that everybody contradicted each other. So what we did was we wove together the memories of 40 different people. And we took what happened in the weeks leading up, the weeks after, and tried to create a screenplay that wasn't a biopic, but rather a story that captured what it felt like to be on the floor at SNL. And this is something I learned when I got to be a guest writer back in 2008. I got to actually spend 1 week at SNL. I wrote a sketch, it got on air, and I'll never forget what it was like standing on the floor as the countdown finally happened. This sense of exhilaration that I think is usually reserved for jet pilots and heroin addicts. And I knew right there and then that one day I would want to capture this in a movie. Here we are on 50th Street. We're actually on the genuine 50th Street, right outside Rockefeller Center.
Great show, man. Good day, sir. Free comedy show. Plenty of seats. Perfect for date night. You are invited to a new...
It was really important to us to make a document that felt like you could have almost found it from 1975. And the first step of that was how we shot the film. And sitting next to me is my lifelong cinematographer, Eric Steelberg. And years ago, we made a movie called The Front Runner, and we considered shooting on 16 millimeter. And this time we decided to dive right in, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And we had tested it on Front Runner along with 35 as we were trying to decide which format to shoot. And 16 just didn't quite get us enough detail in our wide shots, I remember, as being the driver. So we ended up on 35. But I think there was always that longing for 16 that we didn't get a chance to do on that movie. And I remember you came up with the idea very early on of exploring it. And I don't think we ever really...
We never looked back. At that point, we had to convince Sony it was a good idea.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, the 16 has been around longer than 35. It's been around 100 years. So it's like the most mature film format. But you would think it'd be like, okay, but there's this preconceived notion that it's too indie or it's associated with old documentaries or something. It just isn't. It's just really beautiful.
Am I also wrong to think that I feel like 16 now looks like 35 did in 1975? When I watch some of my favorite movies from the early 70s, this is the grain structure that I feel like I'm used to.
I think you're right. And I think what it does to the color palette also is reminiscent of the 70s, and which, is important to us because you and I love those 70s movies so much.
Yeah, these are the films that we would watch together as a group as we prepared. We always made a list of movies that we'd watch as a crew, and then we would also share them with the actors. There's a lot of Michael Ritchie films like Downhill Racer, The Candidate and Smile. For this film in particular, we watched Network. Mm-hmm. We watched All That Jazz.
And Smile. Did we watch Smile for this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the 70s one.
Yeah.
Because that was confusing the first time.
So at this point, we're now on our stage. And I think it's really important to point out that, this is a movie that takes place in one location. It's 90 minutes on the 8th and 9th floor of Rockefeller Center. And we even had ideas early on of doing this all in one shot, but then every smart person in my life convinced me otherwise. But we wanted this film to feel so continuous that on any given day of shooting, there was actually no specific reason where we had to start or end in any place. It's not a movie with 90 scenes. It's a 90-minute movie of one scene that all takes place in one place. And to rebuild that location and have the opportunity that we relied on our brilliant production designer, Jess Goncher, who's sitting to my right.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, recreating this was actually kind of fascinating because we knew, I mean, we all seen the first episode, and it was documented, not well documented, what was going on the stage, but none of this behind the scenes existed. So we sort of like make this up. And I remember just early on you saying you wanted to give each room an identity of its own because it was going to be such a maze and shot maybe not handheld, but shot sort of quickly moving through environments like this. And you wanted everybody to really understand where they were. But so it was really fascinating coming up with the choreography of these shots and creating an environment where you could roam through with the camera and the actors were inspired. Because we knew, like, behind those stage doors, sort of knew what was going on, but it was everything else really had no idea. And we just sort of explored that.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone who works at Saturday Night Live who just saw the film, and he said, what it reminded me most is how much time you spend walking when you work at Saturday Night Live.
Right, yes.
You're always in a hallway. You're always in an elevator. You're always in a staircase. And certainly while Gil and I were writing the movie, we were trying to take advantage of that travel time as much as possible, that we were never going to go into a staircase or into an elevator or walk down a hallway unless we were using it as an opportunity to tell more story. And it's one of the things that I love about the accuracy of the work that you did in this film is that the stairway is down to the detail. The hallway is down to the detail. It's not just the famous sets.
Yeah, no. Yes. We did go back there and we looked around 30 Rock a little. It's obviously completely different now. And this hallway actually that they're in now, which we called Broadway, and the other one was we called Main Street, which is sort of a much more formal, left over from the radio days, the formal entrance from the elevator into the stages. It was great that we were able to differentiate between those color-wise. And I remember when you and I first were talking, when you get off the elevators, you have a choice to make. You can go down this hallway or the more formal hallway. And it was like making history. It was history that existed, going down, straight shot down that formal, or take a little bend and make history, take a little leap of faith and go down this other hallway to get into the stage. So I thought that was a good choice that we made, I think.
It's impossible to also not watch this shot and not think about costumes because, look, this is a movie that has 80 speaking roles and it has 80 background actors, and we wanted the audience to become familiar and comfortable with all of them. Even if they weren't one of the stars, we wanted the audience to form a relationship. So by the end of the film, whether you're seeing a camera operator or a cue card guy, you feel like you know them. And I think the reason why you get to know them so well in this opening shot, even though you're introduced to so many characters, is the costumes are so specific. Danny, how do you... I'm sitting here also next to my brilliant costume designer, Danny Glicker. How do you even begin to approach a movie like this?
Well, I love research. I go a little crazy on the research, and I do it because I feel like what it does is it feeds me and it gives me the vocabulary that I'm going to need to express the world that we're about to enter. And then once I feel really well armed with a real true understanding of the world, I get the best thing in the world. I mean, I feel like I get the best job because I get to spend quality time with each actor and to really discover through the clothes, like what's going to unlock this person and find both the differences and commonalities with their soul and to hopefully allow this character to emerge. And, you know, I watch all these scenes and I can't help but marvel that I got to spend so much quality time with each and every one of them individually, because my goal was to arm them all with all of the confidence that they needed to be a fully realized human being that I can let loose in the world and not have to worry about their clothes, that they can just live and do whatever they want and know that like they are 100% authentic to the world that they exist in.
When I watch this back, the thing that really strikes me, I mean, obviously the stars are so well dressed, but it's the background. And I'm curious, obviously we talked a lot about the detail of this location and wanted to really feel like you just got dropped into 1975. Like the camera is almost like someone with their head on a swivel, and everywhere they look, everything feels real. How do you find a way to get all those details right on the background?
You and I really talked very carefully about creating this world and acknowledging the differences that each person contained relative to their class, their place in the production pecking order, their experience levels. And you and I remember, were really, really careful in all of our meetings, looking at everyone, making sure that each person, every single person had something that was a distinct trademark. And that was something that we were really obsessed with, was making sure that we have all these people, but there's not two of anyone. Every single person is their own person. When you look around the room, you will know who each person is. And that could be a lead, or that could be a supporting player or a background artist. But that is why when we look, it feels alive, is because these people were alive.
I love what you just said about, a lead or versus supporting actor. And that's kind of the other funny thing about the movie, right? Is that every day an actor shows up on this set. Look, some days you're the lead and sometimes you're the background. It doesn't matter where you are on the call sheet. And when I think about that, what it really makes me think about is sound. Because you look at a scene like the one we just were watching, and there are so many layers of sound, and they were all recorded live on set. And what was the most amount of tracks? I'm here sitting next to the brilliant Steve Morrow, production sound mixer, who I've been working with. All you guys have been working with for a long time. Steve, what was the most amount of tracks you ever recorded on this film?
Well, on this one, it was 58 tracks, and that includes a lot of the music, some of the live music that John Batiste and his band were doing. But it's, for actor-wise, we had 32 going, and that was mostly for for that big long shot we just saw going from the elevator all the way through.
And then you also had mics built into the actual set, right?
Yeah, we put a ambisonic mic, which is kind of a fancy word for like a Dolby Atmos surround mic.
We're doing commentary right now. You can get fancy.
Yeah. Well, we put it up in the rafters, and we put it into the affiliates room to give it more air and life. Because a lot of the time when you're, this whole movie is radio mics, except for maybe one shot where it was boomed. And that can a lot of the time sound really throaty and muddy. And so to give it a little bit more air and life, we had mics that we just always ran, always tracked, so that no matter what, the post-production could kind of open up some of the mics and give it a little more life. Like, especially on this kind of thing where everybody's frantic and yelling, and there's noise and there's interesting things happening. You want to hear it all, as opposed to just hearing it from, lav mics.
I totally agree. And this is actually a perfect example of the scene we're watching right now. How do you make a location feel live? And I think the immediate thought, it's about what you see. It's the cameras panning left and right, and you see people interacting. But so much of it is about sound. It's the commentary that's happening from everyone around it. And I'm curious, in a scene like this where there's a lot of improvisation happening and you don't exactly know what everyone's going to do, how do you know which mic to go to? Because I've watched you do this, and you play the mixing board like a piano. And I'm just curious, instinctually, how do you know which ones to go for?
The camera operating is it really lends itself to telling you where the sound should come from, what I want to hear. If I'm watching the monitor and I'm like, wonder what that guy's saying in the background, I do that in like a split second in my head. But when I'm listening, I want to know what they're saying. And sometimes they don't say anything interesting, and so then I just wipe them out. And then sometimes they're saying something really cool. It's like, oh, all this stuff is kind of interesting. What are all these guys saying? And so you just want to hear it as a viewer, and that's what I feel like I'm doing while I'm mixing. I'm viewing the movie. I get to watch Eric and Matt, decide what the shots are, and you do rehearsals, and we run through it, and you go, oh, that'll be interesting. So it does lend itself to, if you're just watching it as, you're pretending you're just watching the movie being made, which is what we're doing, I guess. But you get to just see, oh, I'd like to hear what that guy's saying back there. What's he writing on? Okay, it's interesting. So those are the things that kind of tell me, like, the two guys in the background they might be saying something kind of interesting, so I want to hear them. They're moving the couch. I want to hear what they're saying. Like, look out, move out. Whether it makes it in the movie or not, it's just kind of an interesting perspective you get to hear.
Here we got Nicholas Braun playing Jim Henson, and Gil Ken and I wrote this role for Nicholas. While we were writing the movie, we just humored each other by imitating Nicholas Braun doing a version of Jim Henson saying lewd things. And we were really lucky. We were actually able to get these original Muppets produced by Jim Henson's workshop.
I have a sound question.
Yeah.
I love how the sound of this movie feels like it's like recorded in a space and not like actors talking near a microphone.
Yeah.
Is that because of the mics you chose to use, or how you place them, or how you mix the dialogue with like those ambient space mics you're talking about?
It's a lot to do with the ambient space mics, because you can only get so. I mean, the post production does an incredible job making the mics sound good, and the Michael and Brian, who radio mic'd all these actors every single day, did a great job in placing it, so they didn't have to demuddy it, if you know what I mean. But allowing it to live in the space was those ambient mics, and just being able to bring up kind of more of a room feel versus just you're talking in my ear.
It's really effective.
Yeah.
I use this as an opportunity to talk about John Baptiste for a second, who is just absolutely extraordinary. He came in and he plays Billy Preston here, but he also wrote the music for the film. And he did something unusual. We decided early on that we were going to try to record the entire score on set, to do it live in the nature of Saturday Night Live. And so every day that John was working at rap time, he and the band would go change into their dress, into their street clothes. They'd come back to set. And then our editor, Nathan Orloff, would show John rough cuts of scenes on his laptop. John, right from there, would get an idea. He'd turn to his band. He'd point to one instrumentalist and say, all right, I want you to start on an A flat, go to a G, go to a B. And he'd turn to a percussionist and he would mouth out a beat like, and that person would just do that on a shaker. And he would just create music in real time. And we recorded it. You know, Steve recorded it right there on set. And as a result, there's something about the music of the movie that I think it feels improvisational. It is reacting to scenes in real time. It's only the kind of thing that someone like John could do. He's just a genius who was touched by God and can write music that quickly. Steve, what do you remember from those recording sessions?
I mean, it's kind of one of those things that I've never really thought we'd be able to do, like that I would do in my career, is record a score to a movie. And then when you mentioned it, I was like, what a great challenge. Because even this stuff here this is them just playing live. And the hard part about it was you have to hide all the mics. We couldn't have the modern good mics in display. So we put a lot of little teeny mics, hit them around. And then when we were able to do the score and pulled it off in a way that you were happy, that was our biggest concern, was just making sure that you were happy with what we were getting. But it was such a pleasure. I mean, because just to be able to listen to what John was creating in real time, it was just mind blowing. I mean, I don't know if anybody, and what was really great was that you invited the cast and crew to stay. Everybody's wrapped. If you want to stay later.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Usually at
Come and
rap
watch.
time, you can hear the wheels of the car screeching because everyone's trying to get out, go home so quickly.
Yeah.
But we did relatively short days on this film. We would usually shoot 8 till 6.
Very short days.
And then I take that as a compliment, considering how much you've worked with Clint Eastwood.
No, it's a huge compliment, because we got look at how much movie you made in any one of these shots, or just a massive amount of movie.
Well, I mean, again, and we'll get into how we accomplished that, because that, I think, is the result of an extraordinary production team. But what would happen at 6 p.m. is everyone would stay. There was this joy to watching John work. It's a free concert. And it was not only the quality of the music, but his ability to just create in real time. We'd all, the whole cast and crew would sit around, the actors, and
we'd bring in catering.
Yeah, we'd bring food.
Yeah.
And John would just try these ideas. And I remember sometimes it would be insane. And we'd kind of look at each other like, well, what is he doing? But then it would begin to make sense. Or even like a week later, I'd see it against picture and go, oh, I get what he's doing.
Yeah, it was a really special. I don't think I'll ever forget that feeling of accomplishment and just pride in being able to participate that way. Yeah.
One thing I'm noticing right now is layers. And Eric, this is something that you and I have talked about so many times, about how do you create layers in a shot. And this was particularly a challenge in a space where there's only a few hallways and a few rooms we're actually shooting this movie in, and we never wanted to feel like you just got bored of any given room.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about our process, about how we arrived at the shots that we chose?
Yeah, on every movie we do, a lot of people storyboard, and what we do is a photo board. And so we, in prep, will get some stand-ins in ourselves and photograph all the angles of all the scenes. Sometimes multiple ways to work through how we're going to attack and shoot these scenes. And it's a work in progress. And then once we get those shots, we will print them out and put them on a board or a wall. And that'll become our working storyboard, which we use to communicate with the crew and ourselves, everybody, so that there's a clear plan of what we're doing. And what was hard on this was that we were doing that with all the long moving shots we wanted to do. We had to start that pretty early. And because of how complicated and big the set was, the set was being built around us as we did it.
Yeah.
So we didn't even have a set a lot of times, we're sometimes barely walls when we first started.
I know.
To do that.
Jess would be with Claudia, and they would be in another part of 8H building something, and then you and I would be with stand-ins trying
Down the hall.
to figure some shots out, and then we're hearing sawing and hammering and paintings going on.
Or we're in a stairwell with no lights and just our iPhones with the lights on, trying to get a light.
But it was a very unique situation where the entire set was on one stage.
Yeah.
The production office was a couple of blocks away, on the lot. And
then Cast Camp was next to us, too.
And Cast Camp.
And we had no trailers. We just had a big open space that your team dressed with all 1970s furniture and a ping pong table, and they would just hang.
Yeah. So it was great. Pretty much, during prep, or maybe like the last 6 weeks of prep, as we finished some of the set, and like Eric said, we would be in another room, but you guys would come over and block shots at 3:00. And it was amazing just to be able to actually, I've never had that before, actually develop this environment and have the, director, DP, and anybody who wanted to come over actually try something out. An actor.
Well, the amount of choreography was necessary. There was no way we were going to be able to get to day one. Even if you look at these screens right now, there's no blue screens in the entire movie. Everything you're seeing is being live broadcast to the screens in frame, and as a result, we had to shoot everything in advance, which means costumes have to be done in advance. The set needs to be done in advance. The editors need to cut the sequence in advance so that once we get to shoot this scene, it's already there.
Yeah.
And some of it was even live. Like we'd be in the control room, and then some of it still was live.
We'd have live cameras happening on 8H.
Yeah. And what also was really helpful was Jess's model that he built of the whole set.
That your son built.
He did. Zach built the model. I always find that, a lot of things these days are previs and all sorts of things, but a good old-fashioned white model that everybody can stand around and pick up and look at and turn around is so helpful. That was definitely, because, this set was big and it was 2 stories tall also. And so there was just, a lot of sort of thought that went into it.
And we made changes based on some of the stuff we saw, right? In talking about those layers.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to create layers and see down hallways.
We'd stick our iPhone into the model and see, can we actually see this room from this angle? And then we would move a wall a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Julian Child,
America's favorite chef.
Okay.
And carving up a turkey on live television.
Shout out to Big Dan.
Dan!
I actually think the decision, I seem to remember the decision that we made of connecting the makeup room and the wardrobe room through that hallway and those doorways, I think was made during the model phase. We'd have that sight line between those 2 rooms.
Yeah, you're right.
Danny, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind chiming in a little bit about the wardrobe projection of these characters, where they're going to be basically wearing the same thing, but it's how do you change them over time? And I'm even right now when I'm looking at Dick and Lorne, they go through a growth with their wardrobe, but it's really subtle.
They do. And I remember when I was working on their trajectory, I was building them up to their confrontation in the hallway. And the idea for me was to get both of them out of their layers by the time that they were having their fight in the hallway, and that there were these naked gladiators, and they had none of their armor any longer, right? And both of these men are covered, but they lose their layers, and they're kind of almost like these mirror imagings. They're both in these like pale shirts, and they're on like equal ground.
Right.
And I thought to me that was such like a poignant image, because that fight is about two people who actually want the same thing, but they don't seem to see eye to eye.
They're just using different love language.
Yes. And
can you speak to actually Dick Ebersol's jacket made of denim patches for a moment?
Please.
that was scripted by our brilliant screenwriters.
Well, it came up in a lot of research.
and
I'm amazed by how many people remember Dick Ebersol's denim patch jacket.
I came across a photo of him in a book, in a history book of Saturday Night Live, and it said Dick Ebersol in one rare piece of clothing that is unpatched. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, I'm safe. I can do this now. And to me, it really is about this kind of like, he's trying so hard and he has such a target on his back and he's not helping himself. He's putting himself in these things that are just not helping him. And I loved that because it spoke to the earnestness that Ebersol approached his job with, but it also like, he never thought of trying to like be more like them. He was always like digging in and being himself. And so, I don't know, that was going through my mind when we created the jacket, really.
Eric, can you speak to this room? Because we hated shooting in this room. And I think all too often we talk about the shots that went perfectly or the shots that we had like big visions for. But this room is just a pain in the ass. And I'm curious if you can... what do you remember from it?
We loved it. And the sparkly ceiling.
Sparkly ceiling.
This is a hard room, particularly when you know you're going to have a room with a lot of extras. And then you're like, oh, great, where do we put the camera? And like for me, it's also, how do you light it? Because when you put that many bodies in there, the light suddenly changes, right? They reflect, absorb light differently. And just the whole vibe of everything that you saw before everybody got in there is different. You got to react.
Hello, everybody. My name is
I think we just kind of kept changing things until we were happy. More cigarette smoke, more like make it darker, like pop these guys out. I mean, I really love how it came out.
And keep getting looser. I remember Matt Moriarty, our operator, just getting deeper in. And I think that was part of it. He just kept on saying, just trust me. Let me just get in there. And he started digging in and finding people and swinging around.
Yeah.
I'm going to point out one thing that I really love here. And this was an idea of Shane Reed, our editor. These shots, this was not scripted. These moments where you get into Lorne's head. And I remember he surprised me then one day. I got to editing and he said, I have an idea for you. Just give it a shot. And it was so clear to me immediately what he was doing. He was giving access to Lorne's brain. And look, Lorne Michaels is a cipher. This is, and even though I got to have a few conversations with him about this movie, I think he keeps most people at arm's length. So the opportunity to see inside his brain at 30 years old, before he is the creator of Saturday Night Live, before he's famous, to see his vulnerability, it's not something that we could do in his performance through Gabe much, but it was an opportunity to do it through editing.
It was a brilliant choice. Instantly, as an audience member watching it going, oh yeah, that's incredible. Right. It just brings up all the tension. And
I remember Willem Dafoe on his first day, he came to set and he just sat up on in the stands and he just watched everyone acting. And it really intimidated the young actors who kept on coming over to me and saying, Willem Dafoe is just watching us. I don't know how to do this right now. He just keeps watching us. And finally, at the end of the day, I went up to Willem and said, you having a good time? And he goes, yeah. You know what I like about your movie? No edge of frame. I don't know what the fuck you're shooting.
The sound department panicked on his first day when he was just watching. We were like, do we have to mic him? When's he going to hop into the frame? We didn't know.
It's true. You never really know when the camera was going to point. And we somewhat set it up like that.
Which is incredible.
Everything was always lit. Everything was always dressed.
And the movie looks incredible. And I don't think people realize that, like, you built that all into the set. And, like, to the point where it just, none of it looks bad. It looks cinematic. It looks beautiful. And it kind of blows my mind that you're able to pull that off.
Do you want to speak about that? Because I think that is something really unique to this movie, that you worked with Jess to build all the lighting practically into the set and hide all the cables into the set so that the camera could continuously move and turn around and shoot in any direction and surprise us all the time.
Yeah, because of the conversations you and I had, and part of that as a result from the original dream of having it all one continuous shot. I know we talked about still having a lot of long shots and being able to have the actors go wherever they wanted, and being able to think on our feet a little bit, not have to wait for stopping, lighting a scene like you traditionally do. So I worked early on with Jess and set decorator Claudia to build in as much lighting into the sets as possible and put the lighting in places that could be photographed as practical, which means like built in part of the set lighting, but still do the job we needed tonally and emotionally for the scenes. And it was tricky. And there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of track lighting. Track lighting became our friend, and period, right? So it'll always look good on frame. But also in the studio, in 8H, right? All that lighting grid that we put in, we built all that studio lighting. That is actually set decoration, but it's also part of the lighting department. Like, so we created that period light grid and then photographed it, but it was the light we were using for the scenes.
Well, that was crazy also because you had every light in the building was on a fader.
That's right.
And I remember you were able to, using an iPad, change every single light down to the buttons inside of the elevator.
Yeah.
Every light bulb had a number and could be dialed in.
Yeah, and they're all period. Period meaning, there are no LEDs, very few LEDs. But in the studio, for instance, it's all incandescent old hot lights, just like the ones that they used back then.
Yeah.
Colin Blow, shout out to Colin Blow.
Breakfast of Champions.
Yeah, and I mean, it really is. You have to just remember, this thing was an empty box when we went in there. So sets like this had ceilings and other rooms, but the stage, and Eric and Dan, the gaffer, did just an amazing job of putting up a very complicated system to light all the swing sets, but also creating a ceiling in there high enough to light the sets, but low enough to understand that it's a TV studio that we're in. And it just said so much about it, and they really did an amazing job. And just even be able to get all those Mo Richardson lighting equipment.
Yeah, and retooling them to put modern lights inside them so you get the right amount of color and the right amount of illumination, even though the physical piece looks like a classic light.
Yeah.
I want to point out Tracy Letts for a second, who joined us at the very last second. We were shooting up here, and we literally reached out to him the day before, and he jumped on a plane from Oklahoma and joined us and just crushed this monologue. I also want to point out the sofa. There was a beat a moment ago where the stagehands came in and they picked up a sofa. The girls hop off and they walk out with the sofa. And it's one of those details that for Gil, Ken, and I was really important, that we're tracking every prop and every actor, and we always know where everything is. So obviously, a few scenes back, we saw John Belushi and Gilda Radner sitting on a sofa doing a sketch, and the light boom drops and the sofa catches on fire and it gets hauled away. And a beat later, we're in the hallway watching Lauren and Rosie have a conversation when that sofa comes swinging by. And now we're up on the 17th floor, and we're in the midst of all this other action, but the stagehands come in and they're stealing a sofa to replace the one that was in the sketch. And the film is filled with that kind of detail that went back to the way we wrote it. It was a much different writing experience than we've ever accomplished. Usually we're thinking about the arc of like 2 or 3 characters and you build everything along that tree. Here, we're trying to keep track of everything. I'm going to point out one more fun detail. You'll notice in the scene that the actors have just been given new pages. Now, when Gil and I were writing, we were desperately looking for a copy of the original screenplay of Saturday Night Live in 1975, the script that they used on October 11th, and nobody had it. Everyone we did interview, all the way up to Lorne Michaels, every time we asked them, do you have the script from opening night? Nobody had it. One person had it. We asked Billy Crystal, do you have your script from opening night? And he said, yeah, I think I can find it. Hour later, I found it. We went over to his house, and he flipped through the script, and he pointed to a blank page, and he said, this is where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
And he said, we were like, do you mind if we scan it? And we immediately scanned the script with our phones. And it is Billy's script that is every prop script in the movie. So anytime you see the actors holding a script in the film,
like this,
like that,
or burning it,
It's actually a scanned copy of Billy Crystal's original screenplay.
That's a great story.
Your words don't scare me, Mr. O'Donoghue. I am a woman of God.
You know, you mentioned Tracy Letts, but that reminded me of the casting you went through, which is extraordinary on this movie. Everybody.
Shout out to John Papsadera.
Yeah, it's so good.
When I used to tell people about this idea, I'd say, I want to make a movie about the opening night of Saturday Night Live and the 90 minutes leading up to it going live. People would inevitably say, oh, that's a really cool idea, but that's impossible to cast. And I went to John Papsadera, who I've been working with for over a decade, who is particularly great at this thing. He just excels at ensembles. You know him from his work with Chris Nolan. He did the Dark Knight trilogy, and he did Oppenheimer, and he did Dunkirk. He kills at these ensembles, and he's particularly brilliant at not only identifying new talent that you've never heard of. You know, when we made a movie called Men, Women, and Children together, that was Timothée Chalamet's first role. But he's also good at identifying an actor who you've always seen in one light and then showcases another. And a great example of that is the way he cast Benny Safdie in Oppenheimer as this Hungarian scientist. So here we had 80 speaking roles, and so many of them were distinct characters and tricky. I mean, look at what Tommy Dewey is doing here as Michael O'Donoghue, one of the trickiest roles to play. This dark comedian who says the kind of vile things that would make you hate somebody, and yet in Tommy Dewey, you love him.
Just crushes it.
Yeah. And Catherine Curtin, who also kills this as the NBC censor, she finds a humanity for that character somehow and makes her honest and real, even though, man, do you want to hate her.
I'll quit. Yeah, I doubt that.
It's Leo. He's been fighting with security.
In 10 years, how many of these cast members become the next, Timothée Chalamet from
Well, by the time someone's listening to this commentary, they'll either be able to tell you you're right or you're wrong.
Here's the phone number. Call us and let us
There
know.
was an aside, so Lauren, well, I have you.
Andrew Feldman there as Neil. Originally going to be played by Finn Wolfhard, but the Stranger Things schedule did not allow it, so Finn was very generous and came in to do a cameo as the NBC page. And Andrew came in to play Neil, and he's just lovely in this.
Neither did I. Some of the cast might find that very unseemly.
I completely understand.
I wish Michael Bates was here to talk about how hard it was to find those old Polaroid cameras.
Really not a big deal at all.
Just please don't show this to talent. I don't want them thinking they're back on the Kraft Macaroni Hour.
You know, the cast was also so good off camera. Every time we cut, they would just be so lovely. And they would hang out on set. They wouldn't leave. They were just so interested and involved in the process.
And these two, Cooper Hoffman and Gabe LaBelle, were extraordinary together. When I started looking for who was going to play Lorne Michaels, I remember I was out in London, we were making Ghostbusters, and there was a screening of The Fabelmans, and I heard Steven Spielberg was going to be there, and I'm never going to miss any opportunity to shake his hand. So I went to this screening in Soho, and as I'm walking over to Steven, there's a young man standing next to him. It's Gabe, who had played him in The Fabelmans, and somehow this 21-year-old kid was holding his own, almost holding court, standing next to the greatest director of all time. And as I spoke to him more, I just thought, oh my God, I feel like I'm meeting Lorne Michaels right now. So I invited him out for coffee the next morning, and we sat down, and I started talking to him about the movie, and he was just such a great storyteller. And remember, that night, American Psycho was playing at the Prince Charles Theater in London, and I invited some of my crew that was with me to go watch it. Eric, I think you were with us that night. And so I told everybody, I said, all right, look, I'm bringing Gabriel LaBelle. He's the guy from The Fabelmans. I think he might be our Lorne. So just, keep an eye on him tonight. And I just remember us watching the movie, going to dinner after, and everyone's quietly talking to Gabe. And what he doesn't know is that
we're all sizing him up.
Exactly. He's going through an audition process.
With all of us. It was pretty funny. And then afterwards, you're like, yeah, so what'd you think, huh? Yeah.
Exactly. And he came in and he did a chemistry read with Cooper. And I find that auditioning people in a vacuum is really difficult. It's really hard to understand who they are as an actor until they're working together. So I love doing chemistry reads. And the read of Cooper Hoffman with Gabriel LaBelle was just lights out. You watch it and it was just, you knew this was the cast. Quick shout out to Brian, who did the voice of Don Pardo. I mean,
He was amazing.
kept us alive and just was, every time you found him, it was a gift. So I'm going to Talk for a moment about these two actors here who are both extraordinary. Lamorne Morris as Garrett Morris and Kim Atula as Jane Curtin. This is something that Jane actually talked about in her interview. She talked about how she and Garrett both felt like outsiders, and they would often just sit up here in the stand smoking cigarettes, watching all the action. And as Kim and I talked more about this scene, we were looking for an opportunity for her. We wanted every actor and every character to have a win. And we were talking about just Jane's history. And even though Jane had come from a background of comedy and had done improv, she also was a beautiful actress who just did a lot of commercials in her 20s. And so we constructed this monologue while we were shooting as something that emulated a lot of the work that Jane ended up doing on Saturday Night Live and was just a signifier for how much she felt like an outsider. In casting this movie in general, we're not looking for people to do perfect impersonations of every character. What we were trying to find was actors who could capture at least one piece of the essence of the original performer. For Garrett, it was feeling like an outsider, versus for Chevy, it was an ego that needed to be humbled. For Gilda Radner, it was the fairy dust, this woman who was just built of empathy. I love this. Introducing George Carlin as brought to life by Matthew Rhys, who literally disappeared in this role.
This was actually the first costume that any actor wore in the movie because we had to do his photo shoot early for his album. And when I saw Matthew head to toe, hair, makeup, costume, all of it, I was like, we're going to be fine. This movie's going to work. That was the moment I felt safe.
I just remember you showing me a photo of Carlin wearing this T-shirt, and it said on the back of the shirt as a true statement, and we had to do research to figure out what the hell was on the back of the T-shirt.
I know. Every time if we ever see a glimpse of the back of the shirt, which we do, I get very sad because I want people to struggle.
What is on the back of the shirt?
You'll have to watch the movie to find out.
It's a good movie, Steve. You should watch it.
Movie?
This moment always cracks me up.
And she's really singing and really playing.
Yeah, Naomi from Muno came in and just crushed this song and did it many times. It's always really impressive to me when musical performers are taking part in a movie where they actually have to actually sing and perform over and over.
I'd like to hear concerns personally, if you don't mind.
I know you have a propensity for the obscene.
I'm going to take a moment just because I see a lot of the background actors to point out our background actors casting person, Rose, who was extraordinary on this film. And we did something that I'd never done before, where she brought in, for a full weekend, we brought in extras to do casting, and I did it all in person. And I wound up with hundreds of Polaroids, and I went back to the apartment I was living in, and I just put all these Polaroids on my kitchen counter, and I just started to label, this person's a camera operator, this person works in wardrobe, this person does hair and makeup. And by the end, we had this 80-person crew, and we took them through a boot camp where we taught them how to use their equipment. Steve, did you teach the sound extras?
Yeah, I kind of showed them what would be the normal position and how to move it around and how not to hit people with the boom.
Our camera operators, our background camera operators fell in love with the gig, and they really got into it. I think one of them even tried to join the union at the end of the show. But it was a great moment, I remember, where Matt Moriarty, our actual A camera operator, who was one of the best in the world, was guiding Rocky, our fake A camera operator, to a shot. And he was like, it's going to be a medium shot in Gildas. Lined it up like this. And I remember Rocky turned to Matt and went, I don't know, Matt, it's not a very balanced shot.
That's right. That was really amusing.
Nicholas Padani as Billy Crystal. One of the craziest auditions I've ever had in my life, where Nicholas comes in, he does this spot-on Billy Crystal. I mean, you just close your eyes and you think Billy's in the room. And after I go, so you must be a pretty big fan of Billy Crystal. And he goes, well, I've seen Monsters, Inc.
Wow.
He had never seen When Harry Met Sally. He did his research after the audition.
You think?
And this bit with the potato chips it's the actual bit that Billy was supposed to perform. He would perform it years later on Comic Relief.
Excuse me, officer. Have I done something wrong?
This is the first movie I ever did that had fake cocaine in it. And I learned that the powder that they use for fake cocaine in movies is powdered lactose, which is an issue, I guess, if you're lactose intolerant. So if you're in like a Scorsese movie and you're lactose intolerant, then you're screwed.
It's got to be real. Yeah. That's why those movies are so good.
On this, right? So we had such short days.
Yeah.
Oh, is this an ensemble? No, we have many talented improvisers.
Corey Michael Smith. We're trying to cast Chevy Chase, and you need an actor who captures the wit, captures the physicality, captures the look, and we all thank God when Corey Michael Smith walked in the door. In his first audition, he added a fake fall over a trash can, and it was so good that we added it to the movie. This was one of our favorite rooms to shoot, Eric.
Yeah.
We just loved the look of this room. The color of the wall, the light that you got off of those mirrors.
Yeah. I mean, that was just pulling the light pink paint out of the swatch book. That was really great idea.
And like I said, that was all part of that process. We would roll out a color on a wall, and you guys would come check it out. It was really, it was a great way to do this. So this room actually, it also had access to 3 hallways, which was also good. You can move through it, you can get back, you can have the action through it. So it really worked out well.
What I remember most about this is that we came back and did a pickup shot of this on the very last day because we only had one beard for John Belushi, and we knew if we put shaving cream on it, it was going to kill the beard. So this is one of the last things we shot was this right here, this moment where Rosie, because we only could get one take of it, and that was it. The beard was done, and Matt was done.
And then the crew cheered, actually, I think, when we cut, because it was such like a moment of triumph.
Why'd you stop playing?
The speakers went out.
All of them?
All of them.
What the hell is happening? What dick?
A mom with the outfit that supplied speakers at rock.
This is a good opportunity to talk about camera operating, because I think a lot of people mistakenly believe that this is all Steadicam, and we actually achieved this by putting the 16mm camera on a matrix head on the smallest dolly we could find. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the camera really is like another cast member in this movie. I mean, it's right behind or right next to so many of the characters. And like you keep talking about, it was like a dance and it was choreographed. And that's a really great analogy because the camera did have to be choreographed with all the action. We made it really small. We had it moving around on a dolly, a very small dolly, and a remote head. So, which means that you can remotely control the pan and tilt of the camera.
From anywhere in the building. Yeah.
And so that enabled the camera itself to get really close and in between the actors and the action. And then our camera operator on a camera, Matt Moriarty, would be, nearby on a remote station, controlling it all and talking on the headset. And while our dolly grip, Daryl, would be dancing with the actors and moving this camera around with such grace and speed and precision. It was just remarkable.
I've always thought of the dolly grip and the camera operator as the male and female ballerinas. That the male ballerina has to have the strength to lift the female ballerina perfectly into the air so that the female ballerina can do all this dexterous dancing midair, but it's the way that they work together that is the dolly grip and the camera operator.
Yeah, that's a really great analogy.
And what I find is that dolly grips and camera operators love being compared to ballerinas.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to think about them arguing. Matt and Daryl arguing about who's who in that analogy.
We're going to get them leotards.
But also, like Kale, on B camera, getting all those really great cutaways and not just cutaways, but these other angles and things that really flush out the scenes. It's just remarkable eye for.
I remember Kale doing, what was he doing when we were doing these long shots? He was also operating something, even though it was just one camera.
Well, like if the A camera would be moving through a shot, Kale would be usually kind of waiting near where the A camera ended, getting reactions or getting a actor landing into the
So
scene.
wasn't he operating something
He
as well?
also
like the
sometimes
Zoom,
operated
or-
the Zoom, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. On
That's
the
what I
camera,
meant, yeah.
yes. Sorry, he would come in and help out when we'd be zooming in shots.
But Kale's a brilliant operator and a DP in his own right, and he's someone that we've worked with for years. And I think what that really speaks to is understanding a storytelling language that you develop over decades with somebody.
Yeah.
And there's a beauty to how long you work with somebody that they understand your instincts, and in these scenes, which sometimes go on for 3, 4, 5 minutes, knowing that while he's on B cam, he's picking up all kinds of shots that we're not telling him to go grab, but he knows what we're looking for already. He knows how we're trying to tell the story.
And he knows what the story needs.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that was one of the best things about this environment was everybody was able to get into their groove, and it just kept getting better and better and better every day because they loved showing up to work, and they kind of knew what to do instinctively to make it as good as it could be, because it just, like with the set dressing and everything, we were shooting a movie about a TV studio, but the layers that it just kept getting through the 35 days were just incredible, adding so much to this and it happening naturally.
Danny, I'm realizing that we just slipped by one of the great Lorne transformations, and it happens like a magic trick. You almost don't notice it.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. For me, it always breaks my heart a little bit because I know that we've entered the next phase of the story, and I was like, oh, we're done with that phase. But you know, we see him lose his sweater, and we never see that sweater again, and we get the blazer on, and I love the fact that he's wearing the blazer over a cowboy shirt, and I thought that was the perfect metaphor for kind of like how everything is just held together by a thread. It looks like he's in a proper suit, but he's actually it's all just like flat sets. And now we have him in the cowboy shirt for quite a while, and now we're looking down at the bees, which were, of course, a recreation of the fabulous SNL bees.
I want to do a quick shout out to Dave Crafty, who came in to be our Bernie Brillstein. This is a sequence that was always really important to me. I wanted to be able to watch Lorne leave Weekend Update, which is something that I learned while interviewing both Chevy and Lorne that I never had heard or never read before, that originally Lorne was going to do Weekend Update. And, of course, needed to make this internal decision not to be a performer anymore, but rather be the producer of the show, which is a huge thing, you know, because Lorne was a comedian in his own right, and he's such a great writer. It's something when you decide, I'm going to be everyone's dad instead of getting to play as one of the kids. But I love that he came up to his office and that it became this kind of interior-exterior thing where you could move through the stairway, up the hallway, into his office, and then see back out onto the floor, and that the action was continuous. It feels like the place is alive because no matter where he looks, there's always something happening. Danny, how hard were the bees to do? What's the hardest part? Is it the antennae? Is it the actual leotards?
Literally everything. We built the unitards from scratch. I had to do over 30 of them because of the spray paint gag in the beginning. So, like, even though there's not as many bees in it, we had to build them from scratch. We contracted a spring manufacturer in the Midwest to get the right diameter and the right amount of bounce to be able to balance the ping pong ball. It was really about honoring the original, and as much as it was about the look, it was also about the vibe, and it was about the way that they behaved. You know, we wanted to make sure that the antenna were constantly doing the exact thing that they were doing within the sketches themselves.
As we're here with Paul Schaefer and Howard Shore, I need to point out the wig on Paul Schaefer and the extraordinary work that Janine and Trish were doing in hair and makeup every single day. You know, this is a movie where, you know, we keep on talking about the fact that we had 80 speaking roles and there were so many people working every single day. And what that really means is Danny's team in costumes is showing up at the crack of dawn to make sure that all these people are actually going to be ready on set. And Janine and Trisha are waking up maybe even earlier to start putting people in wigs right from the get-go, because every actor in a wig, it's going to take them an hour to go through the works. And by the time everyone arrived on set, there was a whole team of people who had been working when the sun hadn't even come up yet.
Wasn't there something like 30 wigs? Is that?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was an insane amount. And I know, I remember it was an insane amount because the producers were not happy about it. I kept on hearing about how many wigs and how a wig is just not the cost. It's not only the cost of the wig. Here's two more, but it's the cost. It's the man-hour cost to actually put them on and take them off every morning and night.
Don't ask her. She's a nymph, not a nurse, kid. I know that.
This is a real story, by the way. A lot of people like to ask me, how much of this movie is true, and everything comes from a real story in this. And Neil getting too high and locking himself in a room and everyone having to convince him out and Danny coming to the rescue and convincing him to come out. Well, I really want to point these clocks out for a second because Nathan Orloff, one of our editors, came up with that. It's just one of those simple, beautiful ideas that I was watching a cut one day and he had thrown that in and it made me laugh. It reminded me of the time. It's such a great device. And he took this thing that John Batiste did where there was one day where John Batiste just took a woodblock and he just started hitting it really slow. He had a big smile on his face. And it's as though he knew a secret that nobody did yet. And I guess he already knew where it was going to go, even though we didn't. Well, it's not one of my movies if it doesn't have J.K. Simmons. And one of the first people I knew I was going to cast in this film was J.K. Simmons as Milton Berle. And I feel like even though he has a few scenes in this film, it showcases the broad range of J.K.'s talent. His ability to be Milton Berle, Mr. Television, dancing, singing, doing classic jokes, and then right into the next scene, you see the whiplash side of J.K. Intimidating, terrifying, and he can hold both arena with equal weight.
I still feel like a 20-year-old. Fortunately, there's never one around.
Kaya Gerber, I saw for the first time in Bottoms with Rachel. I remember asking Rachel, I said, how great is Kaya Gerber? And she said, you must hire her immediately. And she's just fantastic in this.
I believe he's in wardrobe. What?
Legalist Francis' paperwork.
That's strange. Don't look into it.
Here at the control room, you'll notice there's a portrait of Toscanini on the wall there behind Willem. And, this studio, 8H, was actually created for Toscanini. He was the most important conductor in the world at the time, and NBC paid him a fortune to come down and perform his radio show there. I remember one of the things in his rider was that he wanted a fireplace in his green room, so they piped a flume into the middle of Rockefeller Center so he could have a working fireplace in his dressing room. But he has kind of a presence in our movie. In fact, in the original screenplay, we had a dream sequence where Lorne Michaels walked back into 8H, and we had gone back in time, and there was Toscanini with his entire orchestra, and Lorne and Toscanini got into a fist fight, and Lorne basically murders him with an oboe. I was convinced out of that scene. But when I see Toscanini's photo on the wall, what I'm reminded of is the generational rift in this movie. This is a movie about one generation ripping television out of the hands of the other. And, no generation wants to give up control. No generation wants to admit that things are going to change. And this movie is about one of those defining moments. What Woodstock was to music, what early 70s cinema was to film, Saturday Night Live was for television. The moment where one generation just said, no, it's going to be our voice now.
Yeah, me too. So look, they're going to offer us 3. But we got to draw the line at 4, all right?
Okay. I want to do the show.
Danny, did you at one point find some period fabric? I remember you showing me or something at some point. You said this actually is from
I would
some like backstock from the 70s.
I would say most, at least half the stuff that I worked with was period. Or in the case of like these, it was period, and then we over-dyed it to give it that kind of grungy look. And I actually put that. I remember these togas were complicated because I wanted them to look new for the show, but also still look gross. And so I was like, how do I do that? And so I made them look new, and then we kind of actually put like pre-stain on them, so they just felt dingy. And then I did the greatest sin of costume for movie. I put exposed zippers in the back, which you'll see, because I really wanted it to look like this stuff was just clapped together. And there you see those zippers. I just wanted to be costumes. In fact, I redid those because the first time we did them, I said, they literally look like they're going to be in a funny thing happen to the way of the form. They need to look worse. And then I remade them.
It's a good opportunity to talk about Dylan O'Brien. You know, in looking for cast, there was people that we found very quickly. Lamorne Morris, I think, was maybe the third person I saw for Garrett Morris, and it was just like done and done. But Dan Aykroyd was almost impossible to cast. I'm in a rare position in that on my last movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife, I directed Dan Aykroyd in the movie, and on this movie, I'm directing a young actor to portray Dan in his early 20s. And it's almost impossible to find someone who understands Dan's rhythm, his voice, what made him so brilliant and funny and charming. And I just remember Dylan came in, and I know him from The Maze Runner and Teen Wolf, and just had whole other levels to him that I wasn't aware of. He shared that diction, he shared that ability to be so witty and quick, and he saved our asses, because I got to admit, we were getting towards the end of the casting process, and I was like, I don't know if we have a Dan Aykroyd.
It's down on the 6th floor of some variety show.
Any news from coming?
Was it strange having to cast somebody that you've known your whole life?
Completely. I grew up with Chevy, and I grew up with Dan, and that was one of the strange parts about making this movie, is trying to portray a version of them that was before even the version that I got to meet as a kid. And it obviously was sensitive for me showing them the movie after we were done. And we had a couple screenings. We had one in LA and we had one in New York, and they came. And Chevy gave me the highest version of his compliment, which is he pat me on the shoulder and said, "Well, you should be embarrassed." Let's talk about Lamorne Morris for a second. As we sit here talking, Emmy winner Lamorne Morris. As we sit here, Lamorne just won an Emmy for his work on Fargo. Extraordinary actor. And we had very interesting conversations about Garrett's experience on the show. And Lamorne would talk to me about how he had had similar experiences of being the only black actor in a white cast and feeling like an outsider. And of course, we talked about all the ways in which Garrett Morris felt like an outsider. And we looked for little moments, and he brought so much in his improvisation. Lamorne Morris is one of those actors who just with a sound effect can make you laugh. And so I feel like he actually has to use restraint, because he's a guy who could be funny literally every second, and he has to choose his moments.
And he had some great zingers, too.
Yeah.
That he would just throw in there.
Yeah. Lamorne, in fact, told me, Steve, that there was a moment where you had to explain to him, we're recording everything.
If you say it, we're recording you. Yeah.
So we didn't have a choreographer for this. So when we came down to the sequence, the women and I just started working out some beats, and we figured it out on the day. But man alive, it is wonderful to see JK, who did, Guys and Dolls on Broadway, bring those skills to even beats like this. Jess, do you want to talk about the set of the Rumpus Room and where these ideas came from? We knew this was going to be a fictitious show, but it had to give the audience an idea of the kind of stuff that actually was on television at the time.
Yeah, I remember way early on, I'd seen a clip of like a variety show. It was like the Brady Bunch Hour, which all in the mid 70s, late 70s, they created a lot of these shows from TV shows that had stopped airing, and they just created these hours. And one of them was the Brady Bunch Hour, and the set didn't look like that, but actually they did this conga line, and Milton Berle was in it, and I had sent you that, and it was so colorful and so anti-SNL that we talked about getting something like that in.
It was so
movie.
Earnestly ridiculous.
Yeah,
that it actually gave me a lot of insight into what SNL was reacting to.
That's right.
I could imagine the writers and actors of SNL watching something like the Brady Bunch Hour and saying, "This is such bullshit," and wanting to satirize it. It's been a few years ago when I saw Shiva Baby for the first time, and I thought, who is this actress? And it was Rachel Sennett, who I think is one of the great actors of her generation, and frankly has not given a bad performance yet in any movie she's done. Rosie Schuster was one of our favorite interviews. Gil Kennan and I fell in love with the moment we spoke to her, and frankly, I think she was the funniest person we spoke to. So much of her dialogue came from our interview with Rosie. And Rachel got her immediately. And there was just electricity every time Rachel was on set. I found that, particularly with her conversations with Gabe, there was something about their chemistry together that lit him up, and he became a different actor. And here, we're exploring something complicated, I think one of the things I loved about the relationship of Lauren and Rosie is that when we look at this cast and what they're trying to do in the 1970s, they're trying to say that, yes, we're not going to do television like anyone else has done it before. And I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people were saying in the 1970s. It was a moment of change. And there was something very modern about their relationship, that they'd known each other forever. They were married. They were in the middle of separating. They were seeing other people. And yet they knew that they made each other funnier. They knew they turned each other into better creative artists. And they didn't have to follow some binary rule that you would see in any other movie where people are either together or they're divorced. They had a complex, fluid relationship that they did not need to explain, and we're certainly not trying to over-explain it here, but I love that there was something interesting and that they were challenging the status quo in their relationship in the same way that the SNLers were challenging the status quo of television.
Anyways, I don't know. Lauren lost his...
Eric, do you remember when we walked back into this little area underneath the audience and we were like, oh, we got to shoot a scene. What are we going to shoot under here?
I do, yeah. And Jess gave us all that beautiful stained glass. We knew we had to do something with it, light through it. And it was tricky. It was tricky trying to find something back here, but this flowed really nicely into it.
Jess, do you want to talk a little bit about that area underneath the audience and what that signified and how we rebuilt it?
Sure, yeah. That was the original art director, Eugene Lee. He was a theater designer, had never worked on a TV show, so he just sort of did everything practically, kind of like why he used the real bricks instead of linoleum, yeah. And there was plenty of evidence, and they still have the scaffolding there today, which they built the risers on top of. But as soon as the scaffolding went up, all the crew moves in underneath, and we had to build a world sort of believable that had history from old, leftover things from the Kraft Macaroni Hour, and also sort of the new regime moving in. And it couldn't be walled off completely solid, so we can let light through and camera see through. So that was a real evolving thing where we had like a cue card area, the prop area, lighting storage, paint storage, all these little departments like we do today in a movie set.
But it's like their little home. I remember when you and I visited Saturday Night Live and we actually walked through these different cubby areas, and you could tell they had turned each one of these spaces into their home, depending on what department they were in.
That's right. Yeah, they have pictures of their family. They have refrigerators, little coffee pots. They really move in there.
And Claudia did such a wonderful job bringing those to life.
Yeah,
with
you
all those
talk about the layers. This is just, that's why it just...
The layers of life. Again, and how do you feel like a set comes to life so when you walk through it, you feel like you're in a real place? I think that was something important to us from moment one.
Yeah. And we sent an email out to the whole crew about sending in photos of family in the 60s, 70s, 50s, and everybody responded. So that was a nice...
Yeah, the whole set was actually filled with photos of our crew's family members. It is a good moment to talk about Emily Farron. We were out in London making Ghostbusters when I went to see a staged version of Brokeback Mountain, and Emily Farron was in it. She was wonderful. She, of course, is doing an Oklahoma accent the entire show. And I waited after to meet her because I thought, she might make a great Lorraine. And as she's walking up to me, she starts speaking in her natural voice. And, of course, she's from Liverpool. And I thought, oh, wait a second. But then she read, and she was just perfect. She captured everything about Lorraine. And just like the real Lorraine, Emily's just an amazing character actor who can do any voice. She can appear as though she comes from anywhere. And, she was one of our youngest actresses, and Lorraine was one of the youngest of the original SNLers, and she was just a perfect fit.
Have you seen Jackie? Gentlemen, you seen Jackie?
We're leading up to one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I just think this one-on-one between Corey and JK, they both brought perfect energy. And there's a really tricky piece of acting here that you're watching. I think what Corey's doing, where He's feigning this confidence, but you feel his vulnerability cracking underneath the whole time. Acting is so much not what you're doing with the dialogue, it's everything else you're doing underneath. Can you melt just in your eyes? Can you feel the energy shift when you're physically doing nothing? And Corey does that perfectly in this scene. Meanwhile, JK, look how intimidating he is when you can only see half of one of his eyes.
Listen, sweetheart, there's plenty more where that came from.
God.
I'll tell you why this is funny to me. We only have 2 visual effects in the film. One is every once in a while we had to move the minute hand on the clocks by a couple of minutes because people were so aware of what time it was. The other visual effect was retouching Milton Berle's penis to match JK's skin color. So somewhere there's an artist, maybe they went to Cal Arts, and their job one day was to get in there, retouch Milton Berle's penis, get the color right, add a little shine, and make it match J.K. Simmons.
Maybe retouch isn't the right word.
You're not even a swinging dick. Call me after he's done crying.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So we had to radio mic everybody in this entire movie, and then when this costume came up, we went, oh no, what are we going to do? So we tried in the throat. Sounded terrible. You could hear the armor. So we asked our hair department to help us out, and we hid the mic in his hair.
Oh, no kidding, like a show.
Like in a show, and it's just right there on his hairline, and they were able to help us out and do an incredible job.
Like above his forehead?
Yeah, kind of just right on his temple.
Really?
Yep. Because otherwise you just wouldn't...
There's just no place to put it.
Yeah, there's nowhere to put it that would sound good. And we knew that this was it. So the hair department crushed it for us.
Another
last second.
Great example of the lead actors of the background. Kim is there, Lamorne's there, Ella's there. There's, you got Dylan and Corey in this shot. And it's a unique film in which the entire cast is present, even when they're not the foreground, even when they're not being the stars. So funny, Jess, remember the red set phone that we had them build?
Yeah.
This is something that I remember from being a kid on my dad's sets. When you would work on an old movie stage, you always had the red set phone. It was the way before our cell phones, you would reach someone who was shooting on a sound stage. And a lot of folks didn't even know what we were talking about.
Yeah, they had the phone with a super long cord on it on a red little pedestal that was on wheels that you wheeled in and out.
It kind of
had a
still
light
have
on
it
it.
on some stages.
Yeah.
Still.
Really?
No, they don't ring. They have a light.
Yeah,
that
light.
flashes.
Here's another example of Shane's work here, and he worked on the sequence for a long time, getting it right. What does it feel like in Lauren's head? And again, as we're telling the story, all you're ever trying to do is get inside the head of your characters. What are they feeling? And there's a lot of ways to do that. Some of it is acting, some of it is music. And this is a really unique technique that Shane brought in getting into Lauren's head through editing.
At what point did you choose that piece of music for that to start editing to, or was that added after you were happy with the cut?
I'm glad you brought that up because we had an amazing music editor on this film named Chris, and he worked hand in hand with John Batiste to get us the type of pieces that we needed for each sequence. So John, on a daily basis after set, he's recording, he's watching these cuts, he's immediately responding, and he's improvising these ideas. And sometimes we knew exactly where they were going to go, but sometimes we were just creating layers of sound. And Chris would edit the music for a sequence like that. So not only is he serving us up options of, okay, what does it sound like in Lauren's head, but also was able to create enough layers of tracks where we could move things around for the edits.
So that's 4 minutes for me, 4 minutes for Valerie.
Danny, can you tell us about Billy Crystal's sweater?
There was a lot of the research of rather whimsical clothing on Billy Crystal. He had a very boyish way of dressing, and I think that we were exploring all these things, and we got to the seahorse, and we fell in love, and it really went all the way back to that mandate that we wanted each person to have something that was their trademark. There's one thing you could always find them with, and it was that, and I also just felt like it was so indicative of who he was. This guy who was like, his heart's literally on his sleeve. Like, he's not afraid of being seen as someone who's enthusiastic. And I just like love that about him.
And one thing I love about that scene is that everything is public at SNL, that you can't really have a private moment. There's always people around. You're in each other's shit. And so when Billy Crystal is having one of the worst moments of his life, it's happening in front of other people. It's not private. And here's the prize fight. Here's what you came for, folks. LaBelle, Hoffman, head to head. All of us had a fun time watching them do this scene. I think the entire crew could have watched this over and over because each take, they just brought something different and new. All these little moves. Andrew.
Always keeping the pressure on the audience.
Yeah.
And the stairwell's the only private place in the studio.
That's true. Eric, you want to talk about how much fun it is to shoot in that stairwell?
Not fun. Not fun at all. Really tight. Not a lot of place to put lights nor the cameras. But you know what? It's like, it's the right place. It's the right place, you know, and you got to feel that claustrophobia. You got to understand why they're there.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, Eric, this is something that you and I have talked about a lot over the years, is that in many ways it's easier to shoot in an uncompromising location that forces you to do things rather than in an open field where you can do anything.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly forces a lot of, because you have to, a creative solution. And you don't get to do what you want to do. You do what you have to do. But in that, I think it opens your mind to things, ways to execute the shots that you wouldn't have normally thought of if you'd been able to, you know, remove walls or get further back or, you know, shoot on the lens that you want.
And it forces a kind of an amount of intimacy that you otherwise might not have.
Right.
I think on a lot of shoots, they're always flying walls and they're putting the cameras wherever the hell they want. And by dealing with the banister and the door and the wall, the camera is shoved in there, and you almost feel that as an audience, how close you are to them, how uncomfortably close you are to them.
Yeah, and I remember just when we were designing this set, we kept having conversations like, guys, what walls do you need me to move? Like, and we were just like, you know what? No, don't worry about it. Just build it like you would a real location, like a real building. And you were like, no, really, which ones do you want to be able to move? And I was like, nah, we were like, no, we don't really do that.
I think we only had one pliable wall, was the elevator.
Yeah, well, and then the control room, but we never used it.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that whole back wall in the control room.
But you're right. Some of these confines really lead you into good decisions.
Yeah.
And also, Eric, you shot this on film, so the lighting really needed to. It wasn't like a digital where you can adjust for.
Yeah, there was a lot of light in all these sets.
You know what I love about shooting on film is that you can hear it. I know you don't love it, Steve, but I love it.
I don't mind it.
There's a moment where you turn the camera on and you hear the film running through the camera, and it kind of lets everyone know, all right, this is it.
And the image on the monitors has a little flicker to it.
Yeah.
Nice work, fellas. A little heavy on the flow, but very funny.
Sorry about the clothes.
And your face.
I should take a moment to talk about McCabe and Taylor, who play Tom Davis and Al Franken. They did something unusual. They sent in their first audition together. They already knew each other. They were already buddies. They already had great chemistry. And they recorded their self-tape at home together. And as a result, it was just kind of undeniable how great they would be.
They did their fitting together. They came in and they're truly
inseparable.
They're truly inseparable, best friends.
We always mic'd them together.
And I was like, are you sure it's okay that he's here? And they'd be like, yes. And I'd be like, blink twice. And they loved being together, and it was really fun. And I got to see them together. I got to dress them together.
Danny, how hard was it doing Jim Henson's costume?
It was actually really fun, but it was a challenge because I wanted to create a bit of chaos. And so one of the tricks that I employed was that bright orange stripe that you see throws him off center. And the idea is that we're constantly looking for symmetry. And I wanted Jim Henson to always feel like he just was off balance in this environment that was not accepting of his brilliant gifts, right? And so the idea was I actually created this material for him, and that was like a little trick that I put in to throw the audience off balance.
Danny, I'll never forget the first thing you ever said to me when we met for Thank You for Smoking. You looked at me and you said, in your movie, the necktie is the window to the soul. And I thought, I'm going to work with this guy for the rest of my life.
Hello?
This again, now we're back out on the actual 50th Street outside Rockefeller Center. It was our first night of shooting, actually. And we had to establish the bloody shirt before we ever shot it getting covered in blood, which I knew was difficult.
Nightmare. Yeah.
Sorry. And now here we are in Atlanta on Peachtree Street, shooting Lauren walk into a bar as though it's only a few feet away. I'm so grateful to Brad Garrett for joining us for this. We reached out to him and, we wanted to get this right. We're trying to portray, throughout the movie, you're trying to portray the intergenerational shifts. What is about to change? And of course, this is the voice of comedy at the time. We're talking about the Catskills comedians. And I reached out to Brad. I told him exactly what we were doing, and he was just down. And he flew in the day before. And Danny, he looked spectacular. I mean, the look is so good. And he just kept on contributing jokes. He knew exactly the bit. And he had remembered older comedians when he was a kid who were not only doing a certain kind of humor, but really defensive of their generation, who did not want to give up to the next guys, and how difficult and, it was competitive. They were nasty. And just Brad just made it perfect.
His fitting was so much fun because he understood every single reference, and then he would turn each piece of clothing into a history lesson about the comedian who would have worn that. He is an encyclopedia and a delight.
And here we have Josh playing Alan Zweibel. Josh and I, worked together on the movie The Front Runner, and so he was already kind of familiar with the style that we like to shoot. But for Alan Zweibel, who was really lovely and we did a few interviews with, he actually let us copy his actual joke book from the era. So, and again, in the question of, did things really happen? Yes. Lorne Michaels found Alan Zweibel at a bar in a moment just like this. And our props department, led by Michael Bates, recreated Alan Zweibel's joke book down to the inch.
This is the last scene we shot, wasn't it, of the movie?
Was it?
Oh, we ended outside in the sidewalk, I think. This is the last day, though.
This is a little clever move. Danny had been pushing Lorne to be wearing an overcoat outside, which I agreed was the right look for it, and we didn't want to be thinking about the blood while he was out here at the ice rink. And so we came up with this beat together, Danny, of him just stealing a jacket in the bar.
I love it. It works so well. I love the look. I love the look and the beat of the jacket all alone.
There's something so romantic about this location, and it's the perfect opportunity to talk about Ella Hunt. If there was a character that intimidated me the most, it was Gilda Radner, because she's not only famous, but she occupies a part of our heart. And there's something to the fact that when you think about Gilda Radner's greatest moments, they're not only comedic, they're beautiful, and there was an empathy to her, an overwhelming empathy that we just associate with her. And it was Peter Rice, one of our producers, who had actually suggested, is there an opportunity to put them both at the ice rink? Both John and Gilda, the actors that we would lose too soon. And in thinking about that, Gil and I came up with a scene where Gilda would be talking about the future, a future that both these people would never see. And Ella understood the weight of it. Ella, who is also British, was able to do the voice in a way that just kind of blew our minds. You could close your eyes and think you were in the room with Gilda. But she understood that empathy, and she crushed the scene. And I've had multiple former SNLers who watch the movie, and this is the scene that makes them cry. And it's all because of the way Ella talks about the future.
I don't know. Let me ask my childhood dreams.
Now, in this scene, we also pull off a miraculous piece of filmmaking continuity, in that half of it was shot at the ice rink at Rockefeller Center, and half of it was shot at a soundstage in Atlanta. All the time when we're making a movie, I feel like the first instinct is, we couldn't do that. No one would ever believe that. And the truth is that we work with extraordinary craftspeople who are able to pull off these magic tricks. And while here in these shots, you're looking at the real ice rink that we all know, we've all seen on SNL or a variety of movies, and we know exactly where we are. And in a moment, half the shots are going to be in a soundstage with a painted backdrop on a sheet of ice that they poured days before in a soundstage. Real. Fake.
You okay? I yield.
I accept your surrender.
Yeah, it did tie together pretty nicely. It
I
was
don't think you'd ever
painted
guess.
backing, real ice, handrail.
It's kind of, these are the moments where I really love movie making, because it's very easy to get obsessed about whether you got the details real. And Danny, I love when you get every single detail real. But also, I love the magic trick. I love that at the end of the day that what we're doing is not dissimilar from people putting on a high school play. And yes, we are working with craftspeople and artists and technicians of the highest caliber. But sometimes the best moments are when we are pulling off the cheapest magic trick. This is one of our last days. It was just a lovely moment. We got this in one take. The detail that you'll never see, of course, is that the stanchion has a peacock at the end of it for NBC.
Mm-hmm.
Hey. Heard you needed a quick change.
Danny?
I love this moment. This is kind of this moment that rides the line between magical realism and total realism, and you don't know where it is, but it's sort of in the heart of our movie. And I know that I wanted this one transition that's about to happen to feel magical, and that's when he puts his jacket on, and out comes the duck pin, the mama duck with her ducklings, and it just magically goes on. And that was actually a little bit of movie magic that we created with magnets.
Yeah.
And because I didn't want her to be fumbling, I wanted to feel like he's finally at home, and we're now being rewarded with the Lorne that is about to become the Lorne for history.
Yeah, this is like the Lorne Michaels we know. The jeans with the sports jacket over it.
Yes, and in the beginning, it was all about holding that Lorne back, saying, we haven't met that Lorne yet, but we're going to meet him by the end of this movie.
Adequate.
So funny. I remember reading about the bricks and just thinking, this is the most perfect detail. That if you're going to symbolize this group of people who are not working together, who are going to somehow coalesce at the end, it's like, oh, this is amazing. We're going to have them all working on the bricks again. This is going to be perfect.
Fuck off. We're pulling for you. Break a leg.
You the writer Lauren found at a bar?
It's like the romantic read of the story, but yeah, I guess so.
All right.
Now, I've been lucky enough to watch the movie with a few different audiences now in different locations, film festivals, movie theaters, and this is the moment. This is the moment that kills the most. I think it's a result of our conversations with Lamorne, so that we really nailed, his arc of being an outsider. But more than anything, this song is just genius.
Get me a shotgun and kill all the whiteys I see. I'm gonna get me a shotgun and kill all the whiteys I see. When I kill all the whiteys I see, then whitey he won't bother me. Go and get me a shotgun and kill all.
Well, and the build up to this moment is so good too.
And this is the band just jumping in, just doing their thing live.
How was miking this song different than miking the other stuff?
The miking was the same. We just crank his volume down because he's going to be yelling the whole time. And, yeah.
How do you like the boom technique on the extra?
Oh, solid. We trained him for all of 30 seconds and he nailed it.
That was fantastic.
Don't give me no line.
It was beautiful.
Gentlemen, how long have you been standing there?
Long enough.
Lorne, we need to let the audience in.
No, you don't.
Again, the second head-to-head. First one was with Gabe and Cooper. Now, this one here. I could have watched a million takes of this, of these two actors going toe-to-toe with each other.
In open rebellion.
I love these glasses. I love that just the limited access to his eyes.
Burbank? Excuse me? This is New York fucking City.
It's interesting, Gil and I, while we were writing, kept on talking about what the show is. We had read and we had heard and we had, in our interviews, learned that people were always asking Lorne what the show was, and he couldn't articulate it exactly. And this reminded me, frankly, of what it's like to be a director. As a director, you have a vision for the movie you want to make, and yes, you can describe the plot of it, but that's not what you want to make. What you want to make is tone. What you want to make is a feeling, and it's how it all culminates into something. And that's actually really hard to describe to people. You can tell people, well, I think it should look like this and feel like this, and the camera should move like this, and the music will be like that. But to explain really what you're making, it's really not until people go to the premiere and they watch the movie and then they finally go, I get it. So every time I heard about Lorne trying to articulate what Saturday Night Live was, I understood the challenge of it. I understood that so much of what he had to do was convince people to keep coming along with him, even as he was trying to change what television was and how they did everything, how he kept on hiring people who had never had done television before, who were just challenging the status quo. And finally one day, Gil and I had been talking about this enough that we came up with this explanation of it's everything you think is going to happen when you move to New York. That's Saturday night. Of course, we knew we needed to honor Andy Kaufman's performance, which is probably the greatest thing from episode 1. And we thought there was something particularly clever about Andy Kaufman saving the day with the song Here I Come to Save the Day.
Here I come to save the day. That means that fighting is on the way. So though we are in danger, we never despair. Cause we know that where there's danger, he is there.
Not only intimidating because of how great the original is, but also Jim Carrey had already done this in Man on the Moon and done such a fantastic job of it that we really knew we had to raise the bar. And Nicholas, Braun felt the pressure. There was a moment when Benny Safdie was originally going to play Andy Kaufman, and we lost him because his movie he was directing got greenlit. And we kept on trying to think, okay, who's going to be Andy Kaufman? And we kept thinking, the perfect guy is Nicholas Braun. And then we thought, well, if people on SNL can play multiple characters, why can't they play multiple characters in this movie?
Hey, remember this.
Something that's interesting is when we see Lorne in the Weekend Update costume, I intentionally made his version slightly oversized so it felt like there wasn't something working. And then when we see it on Chevy, it's sort of like, okay, this was who it was always meant to be. And it's like fate is finally clicking into place.
Mm-hmm. Is that why I hear purring?
As I'm looking at everyone, I'm continuing to see, Danny, all this amazing work, the way that you have Barbara in the green, Audrey Dickman in the pink, that they stand out so specifically.
That it's going to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp, but if you want to lick it, it's a quarter.
And look at Corey. Corey just nailing the diction of this.
All right, everyone. 8 minutes till showtime. Open the door.
That was a moment that was in and out of the film so many times. Nate and I would talk about whether we really needed to have that open the doors moment, but he really wanted it. He pushed for it, and I caved.
Jess, those are your famous seats.
Yeah, the bleachers. The story is that they borrowed the seats from Yankee Stadium. They asked George Steinbrenner if, because they had to build it so quickly, if they could have the seats because they were renovating Yankee Stadium. George Steinbrenner was like, "Yeah, your show's not going to last. Just bring them back when you get canceled." So they used them.
Are they still there now?
Still there, yes.
Oh my God, we laid this floor down so many times. How many bricks went up and went down on this shoot?
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Is Billy Crystal's script again?
One of my favorite lines from him.
Yeah, and then Drew from Set Deck as Frank Oz.
That's right.
Question: What is a golden shower?
Another real story. Apparently, the writers constantly tried to sneak things into the script just to see if the censors would catch them, and they got golden showers in.
I've had at least 50 golden showers. You heard him, Joan. Sign the damn script. We're going to air.
Also a true story of Tom Schiller bringing Sage down to 8H, player in the Demons. It's amazing, when I look at this, I've talked about the background a lot in this film, but I keep on thinking about them as I watch, because this was obviously, we shot the whole movie in order. So this was deep into the shoot. And by this moment, the background really understood their jobs. And it got to a point where, I had a whiteboard at home base. And every morning we'd meet at 8 a.m. at home base. And I would draw out the plays like a football coach of what we were going to do, where the actors were going to go, where the cameras were going to go. And when I look at the background work right now, I'm remembering how comfortable they got at doing their jobs. And how amazing this day felt, because we finally filled that audience. Full house, background everywhere, the whole audience.
Yeah, there was an insane amount of energy that day.
Lockjaw. It's too much cocaine. It's season up the old mandibulars. Let's get some finger love in there, huh?
Danny, do you want to talk a little bit about this? This is a famous costume, the George Carlin costume, because it was a controversy, right?
There was a terrible controversy because the network was horrified by the thought that he might be in a T-shirt. And so the ultimate compromise was that he would wear a suit over his T-shirt. And so for this scene, I love that, kind of like with the bricks, it's almost completely in place, but it's not what George wore yet because his blazer's not on. And I know that we're just sort of waiting. We just want it to click into place, and it just won't.
This is the moment that everyone would talk about the most. When I would talk about Lorne's genius, what everyone would say was, it is the way that he pulls the show together between dress and show. He looks up at the board, he pulls down a few cards, he moves them around, and in that moment, his genius shines, because he's the one at the end of the day for 50 years who has understood what Saturday Night Live is. A lot of people, who had the kind of success that Lorne Michaels did long ago would have just rested on their legacy. But he's a man without a rearview mirror. He is constantly thinking about what is going to be on the show next Saturday. Who's our next host? Who's our next musical guest? He's only looking through the windshield. And as a result, it's a show that's been able to evolve from generation to generation. Everyone thinks the cast from when they were a teenager is the greatest cast of all time. Whether you're an original cast person or an Eddie Murphy person or a Will Ferrell person, or maybe you're really taken by, Please Don't Destroy or Lonely Island. He's someone who has always been able to have his eye on the future.
Do we have a camera?
This is lovely. It's a nostalgic moment. We knew we wanted to give Dick Ebersol a win with the camera here, and this is another one of my favorite audience moments. And again, demonstrates the way we're trying to weave this film together. This is a photo that, if you're an SNL fan, the photo of the original cast on the staircase. This isn't, of course, when they actually took it, but we wanted to nod to it. Danny, you want to talk about what's going on here?
I was a very big campaigner for the Llama Showgirls in Lincoln, and you found the exact moment, and you were you were keeping me at bay. I didn't know when they were coming, and then you told me it was like a Lorne moment, right? And I was like, and I watched the movie, and I'm like, of course, that's why Jason saw it that way. It makes perfect sense.
I love this moment where they hold hands. Again, it just kind of speaks the uniqueness of their relationship. And again, the control room, no green screens in here. We have a secondary control room in another room that is live programming everything that's on every television so that the actors can react to everything in real time.
Are we going live or going to tape?
So much going on.
Yeah, I know.
So much going on. And kudos to the producers for letting us pull it off while we insisted it had to be live on the other stage and how that affected the schedule.
Yeah, and Mark Sear, who is sitting there next to Robert Wall, who actually worked in the control room of Saturday Night Live in the 80s and was often pointing out exactly what would happen, what dialogue would be being said, what button people would be pushing.
You, John.
Where the hell is he?
It's a good opportunity to talk about Matt Wood, which I can't believe I haven't talked about all the way until now. But when I would tell people I was making this movie, that's one of the first things they would ask is, where the hell are you going to find John Belushi? And of course, we have an audition, and in walks this young man who, I don't know, I think probably since he was a little kid, everyone was telling him, you're going to play John Belushi one day. And he came in and he nailed it. And it's funny because Matt, the actor, is kind of effervescent and lovely. So for him to play a role of someone who is scared of fame, who is in hiding because he's been doing stage work all this time and is scared to be a television star.
Good evening.
And to capture his physicality, the way he brought to life that fall out of frame at the Weekend Update desk, or what he does here in this scene. It's because of the reality that these actors are able to bring to these parts that we finally truly believe that we're there. And it put us in the moment.
Feed your fingertips
To feed your fingertips
to the Wolverines.
to the Wolverines.
Next.
And as I watch the shot, I'm filled with joy. You know, some shoots are really tough. We've all had them. We have shoots where we think back and we just don't know how a great movie came out of that shoot because we were all so damn miserable. It's the opposite. It's a great movie that came out of a joyful shoot. A shoot where none of us wanted it to end. Where every day someone tried to pitch me SNL 1976 because we wanted to go right immediately into a sequel. And I frankly have nothing but fond memories of making this film. Of working in Atlanta, working with so many people that I haven't even named, you know, our producer, Joanne, my producer, Erica, Jason Blumenfeld, who I've worked with, you know, since day one. So many people who brought this film to life. People like our painter, who decided this was going to be the last film he ever did. He'd been working for 4 decades and knew it was time to retire, and he wanted to go out on this film. This is a film about a crew that came together to change television, and it was made by a crew that came together and had the time of their life. And I'm just grateful to you guys and for everyone who worked on this film, because I had the time of my life.
Likewise, thanks for bringing us along.
Yeah, me too.
What an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Shout out to Gareth and Jenny, who did the opening titles for Thank You for Smoking and Juno and Up in the Air and Young Adult, with all that work inside the tape deck. And they came back and they hand-painted every one of these frames to match the work of Edie Baskin so that we could have a title sequence that tried to live up to the original SNL.
It's beautiful.
And we actually re-recorded the Howard Shore opening theme to SNL. It's a really unique opening theme in that it has otherwise never been recorded. It is performed live every single week. And just like everything else on the show, has evolved over the years to be a mirror to what's happening in the world. It's another piece of the genius of Lorne Michaels, is that the original score is changing year to year, changes weekend to weekend. And we were able to get a lot of the actual SNL band, and including Lenny Pickett, the famous saxophonist, to do one more time a solo on this.
Was it the actual SNL band that recorded this?
Yeah. Brought in a lot of members of the current SNL band. But they had to learn the old version. That was the crazy part. And if I'm being specific, it's actually, this is the version from the early 90s, which I have to say is the era that when we were in high school.
Easter egg for us.
Yeah, this one's for us. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.